All right, welcome back, everybody. I'd like to welcome our morning keynote speaker, Doug Fagans, the Chief Commercial Officer of InPipe Technology. Doug is a global business strategy and sales executive with deep experience driving sustainable growth through operational excellence. His varied background includes senior leadership roles in client solutions and implementation, sales, marketing, strategy, channel management, product management, and consulting. Doug received his BA in International Affairs from the George Washington University and his MBA in Marketing, Strategy, and International Business from Northwestern University's Kellogg Graduate School of Management. Everyone, please welcome Doug Fagans.
Good morning. Thanks, Christina. It's really great to be here with everybody today to tell our story. Very excited. InPipe is a small little company in Illinois. Just to kind of set everybody's expectations, not anywhere near as sexy as our last presenter, but I hope that you'll enjoy some of the stories that we have as two guys that are really living the dream. We're having the most fun of our professional careers, and we did it by kicking the big corporate jobs to the curb and rolling up our sleeves and risking a lot to get into it, to run, purchase and run a small company and have it grow and make it grow and do all the fun things that you do to make something better and to give back to the world. So we're going to tell the story today, or I'm going to tell the story today about how we got into the poop business and learned to make it grow. Wastewater is a business that neither of us had any exposure to at all. We had no idea what it took to succeed in this totally new environment, and that's really the fun and the challenge of the risk we took. But we did have confidence in our abilities. So I'll tell you the story about how we got together, how we decided this was going to be something we were going to go do. The story a bit about the acquisition process, the company we found that was ripe for purchase, and then the lessons that we've learned along the way. And hopefully some of this can be instructive to those of you that are thinking about doing this or that have recently done this. Because there's many ways to create value as being an entrepreneur, right? You can start something, which, our last host told a great story of how Cameo got started. You can, operate a franchise, or you can take an existing business that needed help, and that's what we did. So really the team here is the two of us, right? It's Brian and Doug, two Kellogg guys who, had been working in a wide range of roles: strategy, general management. We've known each other for 20 years. We've worked together. Brian was a former boss of mine. As a consultant at A.T. Kearney, and as I was a consultant in the defense industry earlier on in our careers, we really got to ask the question, so why are we doing this? How is this going to end up? Start asking the solution questions first and work your way backwards, right? So we have that way of thinking. We really came through a lot of varied experience, as Christina mentioned. We've done sales, we've done marketing, we've done operations. We're not these guys that are 20-year executives in one field with deep domain expertise, right? So we always bounced around to these roles that were great and fun to do, but we're not going to go get hired to be the VP or the head of brand management at Procter & Gamble, right? This just wasn't our career path. So in Brian's case, he'd always been interested in PE and investment and private equity, buying companies and the process there. I had tried to start a couple of companies myself and failed and learned a bunch of great lessons. So having known each other for 20 years and chafing at this sort of corporate politics and the things that exist in those roles and highly matrixed environments and these office politics, we're both at this point in our careers where we were just ready to do it ourselves. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, right? So it's all about the timing, right? In 2011, Brian and I we were both working in the product safety and testing space. We thought it would be great to do a roll-up of a bunch of small companies. We had developed a pitch deck and gone and pitched this to pretty much every private equity firm we could think of in Chicago. And we got pretty far down the path. But for lots of different reasons, that didn't work out, right? In 2013, Brian himself partnered up with a private equity firm to start to look at businesses and look at deal flow and try to come up with a company. I couldn't do anything like that at the time, so I went back into the corporate world and I worked at a fairly large company that most folks probably know in Chicago in an executive role and had a bunch of fun, right? Around about 25-15, Brian sourced his own deal and was able to put together an angel investor and a couple of other investors for a fairly large company in the specialty coating space, became the CEO, took a small share and ran it, right? Then about late 2016, both of us found ourselves in this ideal situation where, he was involuntarily bought out. I was downsized at this big company, and we're saying, okay, what do we go do now? This is the perfect timing. So Brian went out and looked at a bunch of SIMs, a bunch of information memorandum, and I remember him emailing me early in November of 2016 saying, hey, here's this company. And I looked at it, my first question was, why do you want to get into the poop business? Wastewater? What is that all about? Well, you got to do a little bit of diving, right? So you got to be your own boss. We looked at a number of different companies before Brian even showed this, right? If you're going to set out to do this and you're really going to go, hey, I want to go buy a company, right? It's not as simple as it seems. You have to have criteria. So we thought, look, we don't want anybody else involved in our business. We want it to be completely self-financed so that we could truly be our own boss and not have folks that are questioning our every move, having quarterly meetings where we have to update about which customer we gained or lost. We really wanted this to be our own thing and operate as independently as possible. That means that if you're going to self-finance this thing and you're not fabulously wealthy, you need to be able, it sort of caps the deal size in terms of about $1 to $5 million of valuation. If you want to do it through personal loans and or the SBA or some personal wealth that you have without risking, millions if you're not already, fortunate enough to have that. We were looking for a company that had positive EBITDA. We were looking for a company that was all about growth. We didn't want to come in and say, oh, we have to cut a bunch of costs in order to make this thing valuable. We really were both experienced deeply in the B2B engineering products and services world, having worked at companies like Videojet and Underwriters Laboratories and some of those things. So we were very familiar with the technical sale, and we really wanted to find intellectual property or some other way that the company was differentiated and had a differentiated market position. And we wanted it to be in Chicago, right? We didn't want to move anywhere, right? Lessons that we learned just in this process alone was deal flow, as everyone knows, is very challenging. Even if you have access to resources and databases, right? Even deal flow in this smaller space with companies that were not, $15, $20, $30 million with valuation, it tends to be a constant hunt, a constant set of networking, right? What we found is that business brokers were a good fit for this space, and we developed a relationship. Brian developed a relationship with a business broker at a local company here, Midcap Partners, and through that was where he found the opportunity that we pursued. But in every single opportunity we looked at, and we looked at multiple, there's always something that's wrong. There's always something that is like, oh, I don't know. Right? I don't know if I want to be in this industry. I don't think that this company actually can do what they claim. I don't think that their books are clear. So that nothing was a clear-cut win. So when Brian gave me this, we shared the memorandum on this company, we really started to dig in. So the first thing we had to understand was, let's take a look at the market. So we're going to take a look at the market for wastewater. It's quite simply and at a very high level. There is a massive infrastructure out there that tries to get when the water, in whatever form it is, leaves your house or leaves a building. There is a huge infrastructure that deals with this, processes it, gets it to the point where you can get rid of all the solids and ship them off to whatever beneficial use or landfill application that there is, and you take clean water back into the environment in a cleaner state than the water you're putting it into, right? And the wastewater infrastructure is really made up of two key things. One, there is 800,000 miles of sewer pipes out there in the world, right? In the United States. And what's happening in there is all of the biology, and I'll use that euphemism, that comes into the sewer system is creating biological reactions inside the sewer system. And the reason that a lot of this stuff smells is because of the hydrogen sulfide that's created when you get all these biological reactions at the sewer system. The problem is that hydrogen sulfide corrodes the system in such a way that metal starts burning. Right? And you have to replace these things, and you have to really understand kind of at what rate they're replacing. You'll get overflows, the EPA will be down your neck. It's a huge piece of the infrastructure. The other piece of the infrastructure is treatment plants. There's 15,000 wastewater treatment plants in the United States. And when we looked at the company, we thought, okay, well, this is great. Every treatment plant in the United States should be using this. Well, they only had 20 customers. So you think about even a 1% market penetration, increases the business sevenfold or more, right? $300 billion are needed, right, over the next 5 to 10 years, even get the wastewater system that we have in the infrastructure in this country to a point where it is okay, it's level set, much less advance it to the next level and ready for conversation, right? Then, it's highly regulated, right? The interesting thing that we found is that in order at your wastewater treatment plant to get rid of all those bad things that are in wastewater and make clean water, you need lots of electricity, powering huge blowers to make the environment right for the biological activity to do their job, right? So our thought was, if we could impact that biology in some way and make it easier and more efficient for wastewater treatment plants to remove all of that harmful stuff out of wastewater, you could impact electricity in this country on a big scale. We were very surprised. It's actually almost near 5% of all the electricity demand in the US is used to treat wastewater. And you think about the amount of carbon emission, the amount of money that's spent on that, and it is, now we can start thinking about the green mission that a company like this could have. So what's the technology? The technology involved is very simple and very powerful. You take that collection system that nobody's using except to transport sewage from whatever place it starts to the treatment plant, and you use that big bioreactor, and you take a bunch of soil bacteria, simple soil bacteria. If anybody's ever heard of Ridex or any of those other products that are out there on the market, this is the industrial supercharged version of it. What if you could treat the water before it got to the plant? What if you could use all of this unused infrastructure to do half the job of processing wastewater before you even got to the wastewater treatment plant? You could increase the capacity of the wastewater infrastructure in the United States by 50%. You could cut the electricity currently being used in the United States by 50% for treating wastewater. So all these big ideas were very exciting, right? It turns out that the customers they had, the payback was 12 months or less. In huge utilities and infrastructures like this, paybacks of less than 5 years are viewed as good. So we thought that was good. There was proven data that said we could reduce plant electricity by 40%. We could get rid of hydrogen sulfide and odor and, not to mention the inconvenience of it, but not have pipes corrode, right? You could, and how they structured it, do this where you didn't have to sell equipment or sell bacteria or sell any of this stuff. You could structure a monthly service fee. And as long as we were providing results, the checks kept coming in. So we thought that was a great idea. And the company had long-standing customers. Big cities that Sarasota, Oklahoma City, were some of the customers that came with the company on long-term contracts with customers that love them and love the service they provide. So we thought this is great. And the last one that was super key was that while there were alternatives to solve some of the pesky problems of treating wastewater, there were no direct competitors to what in-pipe technology actually did. No one was out there with a service model using bacteria to deliver results to customers. And this is exactly how it works on a very high macro level. That thing in the top right-hand corner of the screen here is a wastewater treatment plant, right? You might have seen roughly what that looks like. And all these little yellow lines and green lines, those are the sewer pipes that carry the wastewater to the plant. Well, every single black dot is one of those boxes that I showed you, and you can see here behind me, where we're dosing bacteria directly, continuously into the collection system, and starting the process of treating the wastewater. So that by the time it gets to the plant, and in this particular instance, they saw their entire pollutant load decrease by 50%. We've now pre-treated the wastewater so that plant can operate more efficiently. And they haven't had to increase the capacity of their plant for a decade. Whereas 10 years ago, they were writing plans to spend $60 to $70 million to increase the size of their treatment plant. So we thought that's really super compelling. So let's take a look at the actual company. Well, here's a picture of the little bacteria up close. We think they're kind of cute, but we've been looking at them for a long time. But let's take a look at the company. Founded in 2000. Okay, so it's been around a while. Why hasn't it grown? Why hasn't it blown up? Why hasn't this amazing tech been at every single wastewater treatment system in the country? Well, what we found was you dig into the books. It's an overly complex debt and ownership structure, right? These guys had raised multiple rounds of financing. The last round of financing before we looked at it 6 years prior to us looking at it was they had a $5 million investment for a 30% equity stake by a fund in London, right? They had continuously done a bunch of trial and error, right? They didn't really know how to apply the technology when they started the company. So they tried this, they tried that. That created some customers where it worked and stuck with them, and it created an uneven reputation for, snake oil, if you will. At the meantime, they took a lot of this money that they were getting, and they were making big bets on, they would go meet with a very large municipality like New York City or Suffolk County or, or Washington, D.C. And they would deploy based on performance guarantees, and they didn't know what they were doing, and they would, have a big failure in addition to some of the other successes they had, right? They also had, the company founders, quite frankly, were using the company like an ATM machine. One guy's wife owned the building. Another guy had an insurance company policy that the company paid. Another guy had the original IP and charged exorbitant licensing fees. This caused, as the company continued to not have success with all this outside pressure, a significant amount of infighting, which made all those problems worse, right? So they got a good start. They never really got above $2 million of revenue, although even they still were able to generate a positive EBITDA, but the drain on it, the cash drain on the company from all these other obligations, they skated right at the zero line in terms of cash flow, and that created a lot of strains, right? By the time we came to the company, almost all the professional staff had been cut. It was production and service only. And we thought, okay, the fundamentals are good. That should be a pretty good fix for us. We think we can do that. We think if we did an asset purchase, we can clear the books of all this other dead weight. But the lesson was, damn, that was hard, right? While the books were clean and there weren't a ton of surprises, right? This excessive infighting and this, all of these various folks who were interested in getting any amount of return on the money they had invested, and it was over $15 million at this time, up to this point. It was just really, really hard to get everyone to agree, right? Getting the deal over the line was the only way it happened was the final investor that put money in had a covenant and where he could strong arm the sale because his fund himself was liquidating, right? And we actually were able to pick this up at a very cheap price. The issue was, in order to finally get all the politics aligned so that we could buy the company, we had to keep the existing CEO on board in some capacity. And he was pursuing a side project that he thought was a great new direction for the business, and we had to agree to at least invest some time and money in that. So we took our chops and we're like, okay, great. 8 months after we finally first heard about the business, we were able, through a lot of effort, and we learned a ton about how this works, we're able to close. So mid-2017, we closed, right? So now I've got 4 lessons that I just want to share quickly with you about how a couple of scrappy guys that used to be corporate guys and are now find ourselves being entrepreneurs all of a sudden, okay, here it is, go run it. What did we learn? The first lesson is, don't chase the shiny stars. You may, especially if you're learning a new business, you may think that there's some great opportunities out there, but if the fundamentals don't match, remember I said we were a service business, we're invested in flexible assets that can be deployed rapidly to service our customers, right? this idea that the founder, the previous CEO had, while we were learning the business, we tried to keep the existing team in place. He'd been pursuing something for the previous 5 years. The idea was turn wastewater solids into commercial fertilizer. You needed a lot of assets to do this. Every single customer was $1 million CapEx requirement. It was a huge build. And we looked at it and said, well, we don't have any experience in commercial liquid fertilizer. We have no idea how that works. We don't even really know if there's a market for this. We're not a capital intensive heavy business. This is not even fundamental to our business model. Yes, it's in the wastewater space, but it really doesn't have anything to do with bacteria and sewers, right? So we did give it a bit of a go. We gave it about 5 months. And we realized very quickly after we bought the business that over the previous time, there'd been a significant investment every single year with no return on this. We did a market study. Went back to our professional corporate roots. What would we do? So we commissioned an outside firm to figure out, is there even a market for this? We spent the money on it. We realized there wasn't. We shut it down, right? But what we realized after we had done this is that we had seriously taken our eye off the ball during this first 6 months of the business. So when we refocused on the core of the business, you're starting to realize we're not gonna come in here and grow this thing and put the accelerator on the gas pedal, especially in a market that we don't know. What we learned is we ran right up against the brick wall. We're not B2G guys. We never have been. We're B2B, B2C. We've done all that in our careers. B2G was very, very different. And here's some of the things that we found out about this market, right? If you think a B2B sales cycle is complex, throw in fiscal budgets. There's public and private utilities. There's municipal politics. There's all kinds of demographics and spending changes that happen, right? That make this pressure to actually the effort of selling to municipalities a lot harder, right? There is in the wastewater industry a vast ecosystem of players who are out there, influencing with lots of lobbying power, right? And if cities can just build their way out of a problem, they do it. Right? Politics and cronyism are alive and well. I mean, you think about wastewater being 40% of a budget of a municipality. There is a lot of politics and things caught up in negative things caught up in all of that. So the size of that relative to a municipality's budget, and to be a disruptor in this thing is seen as a negative, right? In this market. And key here for us is that the best solution when you're selling to a government doesn't always win. It's all about the most acceptable one. What does everybody agree? Old and inefficient is fine if it's reliable and proven. That's the number one lesson we've learned. And nobody cares about, very few people actually care about the profit motive, right? When it comes to a municipality. Private utilities are an exception to that. So really, if you're a small and innovative company trying to prove that you can save a lot of money and save the environment, right? The deck is stacked against us. 3, we had the idea that we were going to come in here and grow this thing and not focus on the basic fundamentals of the company. Well, we quickly learned we needed to do that. You can't grow unless you're growing on a strong base. And we quickly learned that we had a job to do to create much more efficiencies, to have the resources available to grow. So we retooled our equipment and we made that cheaper and much more efficient. We focused on people and process and technology, right? You bought a troubled company and you want to keep the old management team in place, guess what? You're going to continue to have a troubled company. So we had to slowly over time through attrition and through hiring replace the old company. We built a very strong and professional team of highly qualified master's degree and PhD engineers and microbiologists, right? You got to give them the tools they need. It's really easy. Do the obvious things, an iPhone app, a real-time dashboard, client engagement, all the things that you do at a normal big company on a smaller scale, and that we intuitively knew how to do, didn't exist here, and we put those things in place, right? And you've got to create a really good culture of if you got a small business, they're really a family. And so the things that make families less dysfunctional, right? Things that make families a little bit more successful are trust and accountability and taking care of each other, right? These guys had lived under an environment where nobody was allowed to make a decision. Every single tiny expenditure was scrutinized, right? And there was tons of infighting all the time. And we came in and blew that up and shifted it almost all the way to the opposite side of the scale. You can't do that overnight. That takes time and trust. And so we're quite proud of that stuff. But anyway, the short answer here is all the stuff you read in business books, it really works, right? So the last lesson is we really needed to find our mission, right? If we're in this business and we're trying to convince a city to partner with us to improve the quality of how they process their wastewater and to save money, they've got to know who we are. You can't just rely on sales relationships and shoe leather and knock on doors. You have to have a strong, credible presence in the marketplace, right? You have to build that business case before you talk about how cool our tech is. They have to understand that they have a problem that they're spending money on, and or it's a difficult problem for them to solve. They're getting a lot of odor complaints. They're having to deal with overflows where the EPA breathes down their neck. You've got to establish all that up front. And we worked with a company, especially in sales training, Productive Strategies is one of the sponsors here, who really helped us think through how do we change the way we approach sales. And then you've got to educate. The idea here is that in this industry, the term for what we do is called bioaugmentation. We need to invest in the sales training and the marketing to make sure that the world knows that. So instead of worrying about, how many new customers do we get this month, right? We've got to first worry about how many people have heard about our tech and what we're doing. Because if the sales cycle is slow, you've got to also spend the time not only to fill the pipeline with opportunities that will develop in 18 months, but you've got to spend that time educating all the time, right? And so just dipping our toe into that, and what happens is the pandemic, right? So 2 slides here on what happened during the pandemic and then how we kind of are climbing out of it, and then I'll kind of wrap it up and take some questions. We had a very strong pipeline in 2019. We had invested time and money in sales. We had really, spent, done all the things you do in an old scale business like this, like trade shows, et cetera, et cetera. So we built this up, but it dried up almost completely, right? The sales travel that we were doing, bopping all over the United States, going to towns and cities and presenting our technology and talking about what we do, all of that, of course, ended. And more importantly, municipal budgets started to take significant hits, right? Even a city like Oklahoma City was 14% off of their receipts, even the second month into the pandemic, and it kept getting worse. Folks couldn't pay their rent. They certainly couldn't pay their water or sewer bill, right? And so as a result, all of the utilities and municipalities that we were working with immediately said, we have to just stop whatever we're doing. We're not able to talk about any potential new project now or 2 years from now, because nobody knows what's going to happen in the future, right? And we had shutdown orders ourselves. We produce bacteria here at our facility in Wooddale where we service our customers, right? So the good news is that being in this kind of business is also provides you a little bit more cushion in a crisis like this. Government customers pay on time when you're a small municipality. I know that doesn't necessarily work with states and federal governments, and lots of people have lots of horror stories, but for whatever reason, maybe we're just really good at collections. We've developed a relationships with all of our customers. They always pay us. Our payment terms are 30 days. We're net 28, which is amazing, right? And even during the pandemic, customers were paying us even earlier. Maybe folks were sitting around at home and who worked in payroll, and they were just getting their job done. We were able to shut down, and the team really pulled together, and we all trusted each other. We were able to produce far ahead of need, shut down exactly when we needed to, still make all of our shipments to all of our customers, and service them. And we were still able to have everybody work from home for 2 months without a single interruption. So we're highly proud of that. And when the PPP and the SBA incentive programs came along, we took full advantage, right? We're a small business. So it wasn't as though we felt that a 20-person company was not deserving of a PPP loan, right? Finally, what do we see out there that's happening in the marketplace? Municipal budgets are actually starting to see some relief, and the shortfalls aren't as bad as everybody thought, right? Water utilities have been forced to get more creative during the crisis, so they're starting to think about efficiencies and being open to new ideas. Interestingly, what we've noticed is that as we see people moving from cities to suburbs, these suburbs now are invested in and they're seeing a demand in their wastewater infrastructure. So that is providing a whole bunch of problems that we are now uniquely suited to address. right? We've been able to take advantage of some of these incentive programs to double down more in sales and marketing. And the last point here is we find it's easier to get a meeting over Zoom than it is in person with a lot of these utilities. So we've been able to take advantage of some of these things that have been happening in COVID to really start to grow our business. So that's the story. I'll wrap it up. I know that I've gone a little bit longer. Maybe there's time for at least one question, but thanks everybody for listening to our story. We're super excited about the future, and we can't wait to see what's next.
Thank you. That was, I was listening to this and not just for purchasing a company, but sometimes we have to take a step back and look at our mission and why we're there and, what our why is. So that was wonderful. Thank you. We're going to take one quick question. And you were talking about, now it's easier to get Zoom calls and connect, with people in your industry. How do you anticipate the growth of your company from that now that you're virtual versus having to hop on planes and, can you grow faster?
It's great. And so, we don't expect that we're going to be able to grow faster. We do expect that we're going to be able to educate easier, right? So it's not, a bunch of people have found that their days are structured completely differently, especially at utilities where, it's very old school. You go, you show up to work, you have your 4 meetings, you go to lunch, you go home, right? A lot of these guys are now expected to work from home. They're expected to be available to doing something. And frankly, we found folks are just bored, right? The crews that are out there doing the work are not, but the management of these utilities, right? They've had to go into this slowdown mode. So as things pick up, we do expect, things to go back to in-person meetings, right? But we still always expect to be able to reach now. So for example, we've never been to California, right? The company has always stayed in the Midwest or the sweet spots in Arizona and Florida. But I have no problem now reaching out, and we've gotten meetings now with a number of utilities in California who maybe the only time we need to travel there is when we've won the business and we install our equipment. So we're super excited about where that goes, but I'd be lying if I knew what the exact direction was going to be.
Well, wonderful. Thank you. Like I said, great lessons all across, great reminders on how to run our business. So thank you so much, David Fagans. Thank you to our morning speakers. We had 2 amazing presentations.